Leather Research Institute CSIR CLRI, Chennai, with its specialization in advanced technologies for leather processing and leather products. In our country, diabetes is a very common problem. The problems of sore feet associated with diabetes has been experienced by many, but very few know about the medical remedy of this issue in the form of specifically designed footwear. Today, we are connected with experts who will inform us about problems of diabetic foot and its remedial measures from a research point of view. For the discussion today, we are connected with Director CSIR CLRI, Dr. K.J. Sriram, Mr. Sadiq, Chief Scientist at CSIR CLRI, Dr. Vijay Viswanathan, Head and Chief Diabetologist, Professor M. Viswanathan Diabetes Research Center, Chennai. He will be joining shortly with us. And Mr. Vidhan Bhaiya, CEO of Dr. Brinsley and Director Supply Chain C&E Limited. I am Shikha with you, scientist from Science Communication Directorate at CSIR headquarters, and I welcome you all once again for the webinar today. To start with, we have Dr. K.J. Sriram, a fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry, UK, and Society of Leather Technologists and Chemists, UK, is the director of CSIR CLRI since 2019. Dr. Sriram has made important contributions to the green chemistry of chromium that has opened up new paths for better industrial management of this metal ion at the global level. In his role as director of CSIR CLRI, he is also the chairman of the CHD 17 of the Bureau of Indian Standards, BIS, and the member of Council of Administration, Citra, Coimbatore, and the governing council of FTDI. So with this, I request Director Dr. Sriram to kindly deliver the opening remarks for the session. Over to you, please, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Shika, and my heartfelt thanks to all the panelists who agreed to join us in this talk with the first instance of calling you all. Thank you very much. CSIR Central Leather Research Institute, as a pioneering institution in leather research across the world, has also been working in the areas that impact the society. This includes the comfort footwear, which is one of our biggest contributions to the country and the world at large. The Institute, in the last few years, in addition to the topic that we are talking about today, has also been involved in developing a new sizing system for the children's footwear, developing comfort footwear for men and women. Now we are talking today about the case of diabetic footwear, and as we all know, there is a need for special care for those abnormalities of the feet which occur because of this disease condition. Diabetic foot ulcers is a combination of multiple causes, and a therapeutic footwear for DFU takes into considerations these causes and its remedies. Research such as this requires that the Central Leather Research Institute not just works by itself, but also works in association with the pioneers in the medical system and also the industry, which would then take this product to the market. Here, we have been fortunate that we worked with the best of the people that we could get in this area in India. My colleagues at the Central Leather Research Institute, the Footwear Science Group, have been looking at the biomechanics, have been looking at what could be done to develop the right footwear material and also the footwear design itself for such patients. I'm extremely thankful for the collaborative effort that we could establish with the medical institutions. In this, the MB Diabetes is one such which I cannot forget. And we have been having a couple of products along with them, and which they are today have been using it onto their patients as well. So based on this, I will not take much more time on this. I would rather leave it to my colleagues, both from the institute and also from the industry and the hospital fraternity, to detail you what has been done and what more we can do in this. I'm also joined off screen in this with some of my colleagues who had superannuated in the past and who had been completely involved in this research. I welcome all of them so that in case anybody has any big technical questions to ask, the guys who developed it in the first place are always there to answer you. So with that, I once again welcome all of you to this program where we highlight the achievements of the CSIR and in this instance that of this institute. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for the welcome and giving us a brief overview on CLRI and its activities and informing us briefly about the research related to diabetic footwear in CLRI. So I'm very sure this session is going to be very intellectual and informative. So all the viewers who are joined with us online, you may post your queries and comments in the chat boxes of the social media web pages, and we will be taking those questions at the end during the Q&A session. So we'll move to the subject expert from the Institute, Mr. Sadiq. Mr. Sadiq, the Chief Scientist and Head of Design and Fashion Studio at CSIR CLRI, is a distinguished leather technologist with specialization in footwear science and engineering, in which he holds a master's degree. His focus has been on footwear styling and design, R&D in trend forecasting, and colors and texture development. He has also innovated the HRD activities with accent on shoe design education and training. Mr. Sadiq has excelled in planning for the Indian leather sector in the area of design, trends, and global competitiveness. His signature contribution has been in enabling the travel of India in fashion forecasting for leather and R&D initiative for garnering global leadership. So with this, I invite Mr. Sadiq for his talk. Over to you, please.
Before Sadiq starts, may I welcome Dr. Vijay Viswanathan. Thank you very much, sir, for joining in spite of your busy schedules. Thanks a lot for being with us, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Sriram.
Yeah.
Welcome,
Sadiq,
sir.
please.
Sadiq, sir.
Once upon a time, two buddies from school days bumped into one another almost after 2 decades at a popular bookstore in Chennai. It took a while for both of them to acknowledge one another, as one buddy had a receding hairline and a much altered physical appearance, while the other buddy, he retained the same physical features, had a mustache though, and had a very sophisticated demeanor. Sophisticated he was because he was now a doctor by profession, and the other buddy was into applied research, working in the area of shoe design and development. They had a long conversation at the bookstore itself, exchanging notes on their families, their work, and a little about the friends that they had kept in touch since 1982. The two buddies had met in the year 2000, and now 22 years hence, these two buddies still keep in touch. It is time now for me to give the names of these two buddies. The buddy that I mentioned, who had a sophisticated demeanor, is the well-renowned Dr. Vijay Viswanathan, who is currently the head and chief diabetologist at the Chennai-based MV Hospital for Diabetes and Professor M. Viswanathan Diabetes Research Center, which is a WHO collaborating center for research, education, and training in diabetes. Dr. Vijay has very impressive academic credentials and is armed with MD, PhD, and FRCP from London and Glasgow. He is also peer recognized internationally and is the president of D-Foot International, the first Indian to be accorded with such an honor. He has also served with distinction at the Association of Physicians in India, the Diabetic Foot Society of India, and the Research Society for the Study of Diabetes in India. He has over 250 publications in national and international peer-reviewed journals. The other buddy, he's a chief scientist at the CSIR CLRI in Chennai and works at the Design and Fashion Studio. When Dr. Vijay and I met one another in the year 2000, and Dr. Vijay learnt about the gait analysis laboratory that we had in CLRI, which was at that point of time in its nascent stages, he showed a keen interest to visit CLRI and to see what work we do and how his research foundation and the CLRI shoe department could collaborate to make a footwear for the low-risk diabetic patients. That, ladies and gentlemen, was the beginning. Dr. Gautam Gopalakrishna and Dr. B.N. Das worked together in this team to carry out the collaborative work. Let me now take you through the topic footwear plays an important role in diabetic foot care to eliminate the risk of injury and look for optimum comfort. Many foot complications due to external sources are prevented only by footwear. As such, it is a prerequisite for the diabetic foot along with medical treatments. Footwear which are either inappropriate or not used enough, or a lack of footwear are the most common causes of trauma resulting in foot ulcers. Many foot ulcers can be prevented by regular foot inspection, access to foot care, and adequate footwear. In India, despite changes, people are accustomed to the tradition of barefoot walking, especially in homes, places of religious worship, and so on. The urban population does use footwear more often as compared to the rural population, but to a large extent, the socio-economic status of the people decides the usage of footwear as well as different varieties of footwear. The diabetic patients too are not much aware of the serious need of footwear and opt for diabetic footwear only when they acquire some ulcers, and feel that footwear is a real need only when their ulcers become serious. This condition has to be changed in future so that many ulcers can be prevented. The information regarding the suitability of footwear in Indian conditions is, however, scarce. Thus, the work in this area gave a deeper insight and guide to develop and establish the footwear as well as educate the patients through this information. Now, I would like to mention some of the salient features of the off-the-shelf footwear for diabetic patients. Tri-layered sole consisting of a comfort insole, a soft midsole, and a firm outsole with the resultant total contact ensuring better shock absorption on heel strike and enhanced cushioning from impact loads arising from dynamic foot movements during the stance and swing phases of the gait cycle during walking. Unit sole. Unit sole made from polyurethane with extra depth to provide larger area for more effective pressure distribution is important. The extra depth unit sole has a special tread for better grip and traction. So this is the tread that we talk about. A specially derived angle of slant has been provided in the sole to give a rocker effect, which is very, very important. Here we see a slant which gives the rocker effect. Now this is used to offload pressure from the feet. This would ensure that the patient does not experience areas of stress concentration in his underfoot, and therefore he would not progress to the next stage of risk. The upper from which we make the shoe, which could be a very soft, fine leather, Napa leather, has been designed to take care of the fluctuations in foot volume and is therefore provided with adjustable Velcro fasteners. The counter region the counter region, is also made rigid with a counter stiffener for avoiding slippage and shear stress. Care has also been taken during the construction of the footwear to ensure that there are no raw edges, no projected seams or sharp metallic trims, which would otherwise become a source for pressure concentration and lead to foot complications. The materials used were tested before fabrication of the footwear for their physical and chemical properties, and only certified for fitness materials were used. Did you know that this collaborative work has been granted a patent? This work has been granted a patent, with the patent being recorded in the Register of Patents on the 30th of October 2018 with the patent number 302551 with a validity period of 20 years. Branded as Diastep, this footwear is available through MV Hospital for Diabetes in Chennai. Diastep is a therapeutic open footwear for the diabetic patients with risk of foot problems that the footwear reduces the abnormal distribution of plantar foot pressure. Extensive patient trials have established the efficacy of this footwear. We would like to acknowledge and thank Gaitonde Shoes as well for allowing us to demonstrate their diabetic footwear that's being made by them. We would also like to thank Messrs. PA Footwear for showing their fine, soft Napa leathers. Thank you very much, Mr. Satish Jadhav from Gaitonde Shoes for supporting CLRI and this webinar. And thank you very much, Mr. Anbu Mallar from PA Footwear for supporting CLRI and the webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, India is the second largest footwear producer after China. With annual production of 2.6 billion pairs, India is also the second largest consumer of footwear after China with a consumption of 2.56 billion pairs. Footwear, both leather and non-leather export, account for 46% share in Indian leather and footwear industries export. Discerning exporters are now consciously working with podiatrists to develop footwear for therapeutic use for the diabetic patients in India. There is a sea change. Let us witness the change and give a patient hearing to the speakers after me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for such a nice talk and showing us the products live. So it was very nice to hear you. And so we'll move to our next speaker, Dr. Vijay Viswanathan. And Sadiq sir has very nicely given his introduction. So I'll not take much time now. I'll request Dr. Vijay Viswanathan, who is a diabetologist for last 30 years, to please present his talk over here. Over to you, sir.
Can I show my slides? Because
yes,
I had one slide. So just give me 1 second. Hope you can see it, no? Yeah.
Yeah. Please go to presentation mode.
This one, no? Slideshow. No, not that.
Yes, sir.
Can you see better now? Yeah. So I'll take 10 minutes. That's the time allotted to me. And at the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Sriram and my dear friend Sadiq for asking me to make this presentation today. And as Sadiq said, it is by serendipity. That's a word which I would use. How we met in a bookshop in Nongambakam, and that led to the development of footwear for people with diabetes. I would like to start with paying my respects to Sadiq, who after our bookshop meeting, introduced me to CLRI. I'd also like to pay my respects to Dr. T. Ramasamy, Mr. Das, and Dr. Gautam Gopalakrishna for working alongside with me to develop some footwear and making our footwear known worldwide. So I'll start with the first slide. I'm going to talk to you for 10 minutes only, but first let me tell you why diabetes is such a big problem. You can see that this is from the International Diabetes Federation, and is there a pointer here? You can see that the maximum increase in the prevalence of diabetes is going to be in the developing world, Southeast Asia. You see, it's going to see 122% increase in diabetes. You can see the slide that I don't know how to use a pointer. In Africa, Europe, America, Latin America, Central Europe, and all that, we are going to see much lesser decrease. You can see the red color. This is not a pointer. 122% is going to be the increase in diabetes. So why so much of diabetes in India and China and so on? So we should understand that it is visceral fat, that is fat inside the abdomen. It's not the fat which you see on the outside of the abdomen. I'm talking about visceral fat, the fat inside the organs, in the liver, intestine, and so on, which leads to a condition of inflammation and insulin resistance. My pointer is not working. So you see, there can be diabetes, cancer, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, heart disease, everything coming from this visceral fat. And this visceral fat and inflammation are very much common in the Indian population. Third point, diabetes is not a very simple problem. It is a vascular disease. It affects every single blood vessel in the body, which you can see in the picture. Name it the heart, brain, the nerves in the feet, kidneys, today's World Kidney Day, March 10th, eyes. So diabetes can affect any blood vessel in the body. Now I move on in the last 8 minutes to my main talk, which is diabetic foot. So diabetic foot, you can see this very good presentation, and I don't know how to use a pointer. So you can see that, let me see if I can use a pointer. My staff are looking at it. You can see that the amputation, if you see the number 5 from the left, is got a higher prevalence than even breast cancer or prostate cancer, which are two common cancers in men and women. Now, amputation and peripheral arterial disease, where the blood flow is less, is got a much higher prevalence. So what I'm trying to say is diabetic foot disease, amputation, is a much bigger problem than even breast cancer and prostate cancer. And diabetic foot is associated. It can, if you have a foot infection, it can actually affect your kidneys, it can affect your heart, it can increase your expenditure, can result in you losing a leg, and it will also result in reducing your life expectancy. You can see the last column. Between the rural part of the country and the urban part of the country, we showed in 2006 that there is a big prevalence. The people coming from the villages have much more amputation rates than the people staying in the urban cities like Chennai or Lucknow or Kanpur. So you can see that you can get much more pointer options. 1 minute. Laser pointer. Yeah, so you can see that the urban people have much more foot complication. That's because of lack of awareness. There's no footwear. Sadiq told you that India consumes a lot of footwear, but I think most of the people in the rural areas walk barefoot even today. And it is the urban people who consume this high quantity of footwear. This was a study which we did and published in the Journal of the Association of Physicians of India, which is the #1 journal for physicians in India, where we took diabetologists from across the country, from Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Orissa, and Tamil Nadu, and so on. And we found that the most common reason for amputation among these 1,200 odd patients from these 31 centers in India, the commonest cause was infection. People have no sensation in the feet and they walk barefoot and they get infection. This is a picture of 4 people who have lost their feet, or lost their leg rather, who have been amputated. And one of them was a bus driver, and he lost his job, he lost his leg also. Therefore, in the next 6 minutes, I'm going to talk to you what CLRI and the MB Hospital for Diabetes did, and what are the methods by which we can prevent amputation. I think when we talk about prevention of amputation, the first thing we need to realize is, in a paper which we showed in the American Diabetes Association journal called Diabetes Care about 20 years ago, that if you educate your patients well enough, you can prevent amputation. So this was a study which we did. Now, before I met Sadiq, I had this interest of providing footwear for people with diabetes who have no sensation in the feet. So in 1991, I went and met some local cobblers who were in Royapuram and started making footwear within our hospital by handmade. And then came the wonderful collaboration with Sadiq, Mohammed Sadiq, Dr. Gautam Gopalakrishna, and Mr. Das, Saraswati, and also under the able guidance of Dr. T. Ramasamy. So we first of all did a publication where we looked at the ulcer-related outcomes in patients with foot ulceration. This was a good study which we published. And then we looked at standardization of foot sizes of people with diabetes. And people with diabetes have a width which is more, breadth which is more. The foot is broader than it is longer. Therefore, we used this survey to standardize the foot sizes in people who had diabetic foot ulcers and so on. And along with the CLRI, we managed to develop a number of footwear, which you can see in this shelf. These are people who had just minimal loss of sensation in their feet. These were people who had more loss of sensation in their feet and so on. We also did a study looking at the effectiveness of the different types of footwear insoles, which was also published in the Journal of the American Diabetes Association, Diabetes Care, which is one of the best journals in the United States. So we found that these insoles, people who were using these insoles had better outcomes. They could prevent an ulceration from forming than people who were using their own footwear, the Hawaii chappals and so on. So this was a beautiful study. And then came this wonderful product jointly developed by CLRI and our hospital, MB Hospital for Diabetes in Royapuram, which is called Diastep, and which was designed by the Shoe Design and Development Center in CLRI Adyar. And you can see these are the features of the footwear. And it was a prototype which I'm showing you. And we could actually change the insole whenever it gets worn out. And the rocker which Dr. Mohammed Sadiq was showing and so on is still there. You have a good counter here, good leather used for the upper and so on. This was launched by Dr. T. Ramasamy, who had by that time become the secretary for the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. And in 2009, we launched this footwear called Diastep. And as Sadiq said, we even patented it. And till today, we hold the patent for this product called Diastep. We continued our research with Dr. Saraswati and her colleagues, and we designed therapeutic footwear using the QFD and TRIZ, and I think the CLRI and our hospital have developed a lot of footwear related products. So for the first time in the country, awareness was created about footwear, that proper footwear is important for people with diabetes. I'll finish in another 1 minute. The International Working Group on Diabetic Foot, this is the world's #1 guidelines for diabetic foot. It's based in Netherlands, and they included me the panel for offloading because of our experience with footwear. They, along with some big names like Sico Bas from Netherlands, David Armstrong from the United States, Carlo from Italy, they included me, and I'm also in the panel for 2023 guidelines. Therefore, I think to live with 2 feet, we need to understand that, first of all, we need to diagnose who are the people at risk of developing an ulcer, who are the people who are at risk of developing an amputation. We have to prevent an amputation, which is, as I told you in a slide before, it is dismal, it is something which is not acceptable to the patient and society. So I would like to once again thank CLRI, Dr. Sriram, Mr. Sadiq, for giving me this wonderful opportunity to speak to you today, and you can stop sharing. So thank you very much, and my team is just trying to switch off the slide share.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Dr. Vijay Viswanathan, for connecting with us today and sharing with us such an informative talk and informing us the seriousness of diabetes, which may lead from amputation to reduction of life expectancy of people. So, and also informing us about the methods adopted for prevention of amputation by the collaborative research work done by CLRI and Professor M. Viswanathan Diabetes Research Center. So thank you, sir, for connecting with us once again. So next we are connected with Mr. Vidhan Bhaiya, who is a recent chemical engineering graduate of Northeastern University, Boston. Mr. Vidhan is the CEO of Dr. Brinsley, which is a startup making performance footwear for diabetes patients, and is also the director for supply chain at C&E Limited, a specialty chemicals manufacturing company. Prior to this, Mr. Vidhan has worked at Pillar VC, a venture capital firm based at Boston, as an investing associate. So as a part of his work, Mr. Vidhan was named in Boston Business Journal's 25 under 25, named as a Corey Scholar, Huntington 100, Global Impact Winner, and more. In 2024, Mr. Vidhan will be heading to Harvard Business School for his MBA. So I invite our young entrepreneur, Mr. Vidhan, for his talk today. Over to you.
Thank you all for having me, and good afternoon. I'm quite honored to be on this panel with people who have almost as much experience as my age, but I'm going to sort of try to share my experience working with this problem and how our journey went. So essentially, it started off as all good things do at an Indian wedding. And so I was back home in December of 2016, and I was just back from the US. And that's when I saw my favorite uncle, who was the style icon of the family. And he was wearing his trademark, a fancy suit, but very bulky shoes. And he looked somewhat timid and uncomfortable. He didn't want to get up from his table, and he went right at the back during the family photographs. So I asked my father, what was going on? And he told me that my uncle was recently diagnosed with diabetic neuropathy, and he hadn't been the same ever since. So that's when I started thinking, what was diabetic neuropathy, and why did he have to wear footwear that looked like that? I decided to then take a step back and look into this further, and I realized that as Dr. Vijay Viswanathan had shared, diabetes and the foot conditions are a major problem. In fact, every 20 seconds, one foot is lost due to diabetes in the world today. And over half of these could be prevented if people just wore correct footwear and adhered to basic foot care measures. But, this was more than a global problem. It had almost become a part of people's lifestyles. And over 40% of them will suffer from foot problems. And I think they needed a better solution. But I think the first question that came to my mind was, how are diabetes and footwear even related? I always thought, diabetes was a sugar-related condition. And so diabetes causes this sugar buildup in the feet, which cause nerves to start losing sensation. And so any small cuts and bruises on your foot, your body can't feel it, and therefore your body can't heal it. I remember once during a market survey, someone was talking about how they were walking and they saw blood on their floor. And then they said, well, I didn't know where it was coming from. Then I sat down, and under my foot, I saw that a nail had punctured into it, and I just didn't realize. So that's how bad the lack of sensation can get. And so that's when I said, okay, so since people can't feel these injuries, small cuts, bruises, and wounds, perhaps we should try to make footwear that prevents these things. So I applied for a research grant for the summer with my research problem to make fused diabetic dress shoes that combine medical performance with style. And I didn't really know where to start. It seemed like quite a daunting problem. And, people had done this in the past, but big companies had tried, and solutions were there for everyone to see. It was stuff that people weren't very comfortable wearing. And so I just decided that to actually make this work, I sort of approached my mentor, Dr. Mark Sivak, to understand the Stanford design thinking process, where the idea was to be hyper specific about the customer's needs while designing our products. So to do that, the first phase involved speaking to over 200 plus stakeholders, including diabetologists, podiatrists, and patients, to understand what they all expected from diabetic footwear. We then built this on top of existing literature to identify 4 fundamental design goals for this footwear, which was to distribute plantar pressure, to reduce friction, to accommodate any sorts of bone deformities, and to prevent any form of external shock. And now that we had identified these, I believe that the only way to make good-looking diabetic footwear was to innovate at the very component level. And now, while my family has been involved in the leather industry under the brand of the Chemcrown Group for over half a century, I still did not truly understand how shoes were made. So I decided to pack my bags and go to Italy, the shoemaking capital of the world. And in July of 2017, I reached a small town, Civitanova Marche, that barely spoke any language other than Italian, to learn how to make footwear. And I didn't really go with a plan, and that was not the best idea in the world. So I was just there roaming around, asking people for information as to who can help me during this journey. And then they wouldn't even tell me people's name. They'd give me direction, walk over that way. There's a store there. There's a manufacturer there who you should talk to. So that take that information and walk or drive over to that area and then start asking around again. And so I remember during this process, I stumbled across a small factory which actually made some of the world's best diabetic footwear. And, with a lot of sign language and the help of a translator, I truly got a masterclass from a family who had perfected this art. So how to think about materials, shoe lasts, fit, that's when I sort of started to understand all these things. I then had a direction for how these shoes are made and also which components had room for improvement. I then went on to meet shoe designers, component manufacturers, and leather tanners to find out the latest in shoe technology to address these design goals. I then took these goals back to India for my third phase of prototyping. We then repeatedly iterated and prototyped and handed out samples to doctors and patients to understand what they thought of our footwear. And for the fourth phase, I was I went back to the US where I consulted industry leaders to ensure that what we were looking to do was in line with where the industry itself was headed. And so I repeated this 4-phase development cycle twice over the course of 2 years. And at the end of summer of 2018, we had our minimum viable prototype, which looked something like this. The idea was to make footwear like people shouldn't be able to distinguish someone as diabetic just because of the footwear that they wear. So you should be able to wear this and people should say that looks like any other shoe. And so now I remember, speaking about my project at a conference after I came back to India, and a lot of the audience came up to me saying, okay, where can I get this for my father, for my husband, and so on. And then we spoke with distributors and doctors, and there was a lot of interest. So I decided to, I realized I had to take a leap. So I took 8 months off from my university to come try to build this company in India. And and that was an interesting experience. Although I grew up here, I didn't quite realize how difficult it is to work in India. And for the first 4 months, it was a total struggle. We tried to set up our entity, figure out the regulatory landscape we needed to operate in. Production was way harder than expected, and delays were a part of working here. And now, being the impatient person that I was, when I want something, I wanted it now. And this brought about a lot of frustration. And, if I were to describe our production in 2 words, I'd just say stuff happens. It wasn't just systemic inefficiencies. Most times it was just random things which you just had to resign and learn to accept. So I remember once we had an order delayed for many weeks, and I was just like, what's going on? Customers are waiting. And I remember getting a picture from our factory, which they said, yeah, sir, everything is ready. But, those rings around my shoes, around the laces, we ran out of those. And so, go figure it out. So it was, it was very random challenges like these, which we had to learn how to face. And now, which we've managed to optimize. And 2 years later, I'm happy to say that our products are accepted across hospitals and clinics across a few cities in India. Thank you to the Central Leather Research Institute for helping with the gait analysis of our footwear to study plantar pressure and peak force reduction. Our primary sales channel today is direct to consumer, where we work through our website and a variety of all the other e-commerce platforms. And I'm also happy to share that our models have now been exported to Singapore, South Africa, France, Colombia, Malaysia, the US, and more. So it's been truly an incredible journey for us, where I've grown mentally, emotionally, professionally. And I think for the students attending from various CSIR institutes, I think I wanted to just share the message that there's no better place to start a company than where you are right now at a university. You have phenomenal mentors around you, fantastic infrastructure, relatively few responsibilities, and you can afford to fail and keep getting back up. And I remember that I was able to sort of speak to very important people because I was a college student looking to figure out a project. And if I was thoughtful about why I wanted to speak with them, nobody refused. And so I think while starting a company might seem hard, I think it's once you find a cause that you think is worth it, I think you should make the leap, because you're only going to regret the chances that you did not take. So for me, the chance that I took was to begin our mission of ensuring that people with diabetes can continue to walk, putting their best foot forward. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vidhan, for sharing your experience with us and for your thoughtfulness to take up the initiative and challenge for design of diabetic footwear. So for many, it's really very surprising to know how diabetes is related to foot problems, but it should be known to people for their proper care and cure. So I hope through this webinar, it makes easy for people to understand. Thank you once again, and best wishes for your future. So thank you all the speakers for joining with us and sharing your inputs. Now we keep this forum open for discussion, and I shall take few questions from the audience. So yeah, so first question comes from Mr. Dev. If a person is having diabetic, then he has to wear diabetic footwear, or it depends upon the condition of diabetic level. Then only the need of diabetic footwear can be judged. Dr. Vijay, yes, sir.
Yeah, so I think the most common cause for amputation in India is an extrinsic injury. Intrinsic is where you walk barefoot and it has high plantar pressure under the first metatarsal head. So that is only about 20% what we see in India. 80% of people, as Bidan said, I noticed blood on the floor, walking barefoot, and you stamped on something. And this morning I was asking a patient, he said he puts his foot into the hot water. So I said, well, how do you test the heat, the warmth of the water? With my hands. I said, even your hands are affected by neuropathy. You should test with your elbow. So you see, the extrinsic injury is much more common. So every person with diabetes should be wearing a proper footwear. That's very important. I'm very happy Vidhan has taken up that mission. And also, there is an entity which I didn't talk about called limited joint mobility, where the first toe doesn't move dorsiflex beyond 60 degrees. So that's very common. I had published a paper in 2011 or something, where limited joint mobility is a very important component of high plantar pressures. So every person with diabetes has LJM, limited joint mobility in the hands, and the hands we tested by the prior sign, and in the feet. So every person with diabetes should wear a comfortable footwear, whether it is sandal or shoe, doesn't matter. In India, most people wear sandals and they don't wear shoes. But they should wear protective footwear. Sadiq, would you agree that most of the people wear sandals in India and not shoes? You're muted, I think.
Predominant in the south of India, people choose to wear open footwear because of the weather. And yes, even otherwise, a lot of people in India like to just slip in and slip out of their slippers and not even sandals. Sandals is the next step where they even have to take another effort to wear the strap behind their ankle. Correct. Thank you. I mean, that's a fine answer, Dr. Shikha, for Mr. Dev, who asked this question.
Thank you very much, sir. So, I would like to understand how this foot problems are getting cured using this diabetic footwear. And is there any specific duration for which this diabetic footwear has to be used by the diabetic patients?
Maybe Vidhan can answer after I finish. So diabetes is after I finish, I'll just give a small introduction. So the diabetes is a condition which affects the collagen tissues in the feet. It makes your foot rigid. So what happens is, this is called diabetes. This is what happens in diabetic neuropathy. So unless you control your diabetes and keep your HbA1c, which is the test we do to control diabetes, to check whether diabetes is under control, you should keep it below 7 or 6.5. In which case you can improve the collagen deposition of glucose in the collagen and not reverse neuropathy, at least prevent the neuropathy from getting worse. So that is from a diabetes point of view. From a footwear point of view, Vidhan can answer.
Yeah, so I think from for us, the goal was to prevent these external shocks that, as Dr. Vijay mentioned, that just keep happening. And it's the smallest of things that can cause these external shocks, which then result in very deleterious outcomes. And so for us, the mission in simple terms, if I were to describe it, like we wanted to build almost like a tank for your foot, but like try to make it look like, a Ferrari, but like essentially like have a protective cover for your foot, which doesn't allow pressure buildup across your entire sole. It prevents any friction that can be caused from sliding up against the inside of your foot. It prevents all sorts of friction. It offloads pressure that could occur on any part of your foot. So it's these those small injuries that we try to hope to prevent. So there's no therapeutic benefit that we've been evaluating with this current range, just a preventive measure against serious outcomes.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we have another question from Mr. Sudarshan Mishra. Should the diabetic footwears be different for diabetic people while sporting or exercising? Is there any specific design for sports activity?
So I can just answer before Vidhan answers. So I think there have been several studies from David Armstrong and others which have shown that even a good sports shoe, if I may be permitted to use some brand names like Reebok or Nike, those sports shoes are good enough because they have the front rocker, they have a hard sole. So for a walk in the beach or on the Marina Beach, you can use a good sports shoe. If you're not ulcerated, if you're not had a past history of an ulceration or amputation, if you just have mild neuropathy, Vidhan, you can probably take up the remaining part of the answer.
Yeah, so I think as Dr. Vijay rightly pointed out, like a lot of existing footwear from brands like New Balance and things like that are very highly recommended across a lot of countries. I think in the US they also offer through insurance claims because they're good for people with diabetes. So I think the athletic part is the sort of almost easier parts to figure out. I think the challenge is that those footwear, which is actually very in all contexts. I think that's where we try to innovate. The athletic part is already taken care of with well-chosen existing models that brands make today.
Okay. So thank you very much. So we have another question. How do you make footwear manufacturers aware of the use of scientific principles in diabetic footwear making? Sadiq sir.
See, just like Mr. Vidhan has been a startup. So if there is anyone who's attending our forum or probably is looking into investing in this venture, we would like to guide them primarily on the materials. What kind of materials go into the construction of this kind of footwear? You know, the earlier two questions, the other question was, is footwear enough and will that heal my diabetes? No, footwear is something that only helps one to protect the foot from worsening it if you hurt yourself or you get some certain injuries or so on. So likewise, we would like to advise people on what kinds of materials, how the construction is made, whether you need open footwear or you need closed footwear. Yes, we can provide adequate training not only on materials, not only on manufacturing, but they can also test the footwear with the gait analysis laboratory that we have here. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. So we have question from our viewer, how these footwears can be procured, from where to buy these footwears. Yeah, so Mr. Vidhan, if you can.
Our models are available on our website, brinsley.in, and also, basically every e-commerce platform that you use today. So you can.
So this can be ordered online.
Primarily, we sell today online. Post-pandemic, online is the way to go.
So is there any method to get customized footwear also designed?
We don't do customized footwear at the moment. Maybe Dr. Vijay.
So the thing is, about 20 to 30% of people have a past history of an ulcer or an amputation. That big toe is lost and they have only 4 toes. So you cannot have an off-the-shelf footwear simply because your 1 toe is missing. You have only 4 toes. So it should be a customized footwear because the peak plantar pressures will shift. The biomechanics changes once you cut off 1 toe. So you have to have what is called customized insoles. So customized insoles are available in India. It is also available abroad, but it's a little more expensive than the footwear which Mr. Vidhan was talking about. You can insert these insoles into any sandal you want or good footwear you want.
So thank you very much, sir. So we have some comments and appreciatory messages from our viewers to have this kind of webinar for increasing awareness among people about the diabetic footwears. And so thank you very much, everyone, for connecting with us. So it was very nice listening to each one of you and knowing about this indigenously developed diabetic footwear. Which is a requirement at almost every household now. So we have almost reached the end of the session. Before closing, I request once again Director CLRI, Dr. Sriram, to kindly deliver the closing remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Shika. First of all, my thanks to Dr. Vijay Viswanathan, Vidhan and Sadek for having enlightened everyone on this journey. Let me say the journey that we have all taken on this diabetic footwear research. Of course, things don't stop at this stage. As Dr. Vijay Viswanathan was pointing out, there's some of the recent works which take into consideration newer aspects and also techniques to develop footwear. Next in line would also be that we will have to look at how do we take in what we can do through the latest information technology platforms, etc., so that we can ensure that such footwear is reachable to more number of people. I am talking about the possibilities of using artificial intelligence and such things. Therefore, possibly we need to work a lot, maybe including the information technology groups, so that we collect a lot of data on these people and try to ensure that from customization to personalization, we can take these products. And that would help people who have been identified with diabetes or a history of diabetes. They can actually get some footwear off the shelf rather than having to come down to some particular hospital or a place to get this footwear. I think that should be the next step as we all may look at it. And of course, we may also have to come back and tell the people more scientifically as to why they should use such footwear, because there is, as Dr. Vijay mentioned, a large number of population who walk barefooted in this, especially in our rural parts, and they all need to be taught or told right from the beginning itself that a footwear is most essential part, at least to prevent unwanted acts in the later stage of their life. So with that, I'm very thankful that the CSIR has ensured that one more success story of the CSIR is brought out today in this platform. I'm extremely grateful to all those people in the audience who had asked us some very wonderful questions, actually that enhanced the scope of the entire presentations as well that was made today. So thank you very much to all those people who have been connected to us. And the Central Leather Research Institute is always available to you. You can always post your questions to us and we would be more than happy to assist and be working with hospitals and other people and make use of our gate facilities to guide you in your future requirements as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for the closing remarks and summarizing the session. So thank you all the viewers for joining with us today. Stay tuned with us for upcoming sessions on our Success Story webinar. Till then, take care of your health. Goodbye.
Thank you, Sadiq. Bye.
Thank you very much, sir.